Hey everybody, welcome to Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty. My name is Kate Fantanell, or Lady Liberty, and tonight I am joined by two very special guests. I do have an apology from another special guest, but I promise I'll get him on another episode, and he's promised me that too. Tonight we have a lot to talk about in my home state of Western Australia. We've had a discussion paper released in relation to the firearm laws that are being reformed at the moment. A lot of you tuned in last week to hear from three shooters and hunters from around the country to talk about some of the suggestions that are being discussed here in relation to new gun laws. But before we jump into the conversation, I am so excited tonight to announce my first guest, the one and only politician who has been standing up for the shooters of Western Australia in the Parliament. His name is the Honourable Dr. Brian Walker MP. He represents the Legalise Cannabis Party, and he is a shooter, and he has blessed me with his presence tonight. Hello, Doctor. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Kate. How about you?
I'm good, but I'm angry. I'm angry about what this government is doing to us, and I know you are too, so I cannot wait to hear your insights and how you've found being in the Parliament since March 2021. I also have another very special guest who was kind enough to jump on very last minute. His name is Ralph Folie. He represents the shooting organisation Conservation Australia. Hi, Ralph. Welcome to the show.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
And we did have Professor Augusta Zimmerman, who was meant to join me tonight. He was the commissioner of the Law Reform Commission when the government looked at the firearm laws back in 2016. He is one of the lead authors of report project number 105. A lot of shooters know that number, project 105. He's outraged as well about how this government has handled firearm laws and the reform process. He's promised he'll come on another time, so hold your jets. But tonight we do have Dr. Brian Walker and Ralph Folie joining me for the discussion. So I just wanted to go back in time, just so everyone who's listening, we've got a lot of listeners from around Australia, New Zealand, and even the United States of America. Just wanted to give you a bit of a background on what's happened in this state. So currently, the Firearms Act in WA is from 1973. After 1996, the National Firearms Agreement, the government at the time decided to leave the Act as it was and just do legislation by regulation. So piecemeal approach, regulations have been tacked on. There's been an announcement of a complete rewrite back in March 2022. And the government at the time announced that by giving addresses to the West Australian newspaper, who printed a big map on the front page showing where we lived and making it seem like we were a danger to society because of the number of legal registered firearms held by law-abiding licensed firearm owners in the state. So they announced a total rewrite of the Firearms Act, which, to be fair, it is due for a rewrite. Dr. Brian Walker was elected in March 2021 for the Legalise Cannabis Party, and he came out and said, I'm a shooter. And since then, we've just seen attack after attack on shooters of this state. They have announced a gun confiscation for high caliber firearms, which they did in a terrible stunt at the Pinjar range by posing in front of the 50 cal. By they, I mean Police Minister Paul Papalia and the Premier at the time, Mark McGowan. When we saw Mr. McGowan step down, there was a bit of hope that perhaps the new Premier, Roger Cook, would relax and actually consult with shooters, but we haven't seen that. And this week, which is why I'm talking about WA gun laws again, they were meant to release the bill, the draft bill, but instead we've got a discussion paper, which some of the content is quite frankly terrifying. So I know I've missed a bit. There's been other stuff that's happened here, but we've only got an hour. So Dr. Brian Walker, can you tell us what has it been like working with this government as a legalised cannabis MP and as someone who is representing shooters?
Well, we had a debate last week in Parliament about transparency and consultation. And the opposition and the crossbench, we were united actually in criticising the government. Now, it has to be said, I'm going to criticise both sides of Parliament because both sides are pretty crappy. But they both share this tendency of actually hiding information or using words to alter the meaning. It sounds good, but the actual intent is quite different. Has to be said that consultation is not a strong feature of this government. Now, on the one hand, let's take the Aboriginal law we had recently. They said they'd consulted widely, and I had emails from individuals, from groups, all of them Indigenous, all of them saying, we haven't been consulted. But the government very credibly said, no, we have. Trust us, we're politicians, we've done this. And they hadn't. Of course, that bill has now been revoked. We just last week had the amended Aboriginal Culture Heritage Bill. And that was a lot of work to undo the damage, which if they had only listened, they would have avoided in the first place. We've just had the local government elections just now. The government has introduced altered voting, not one vote, one person. It's altered the voting to have the, if you like, the votes weighted, which is fine if you've got universal voting, but not much use if only 25% of the population is voting. So I attended today, and as predicted, it was just all messy, not a good system at all. The people doing it did a fantastic job, but the end result is more difficult. And does it actually represent the people? I don't think it does. And we had good input from people who have had lots of experience in local government, and they weren't listened to. Now, the firearm legislation is yet another case of this. Now, the opposition and the crossbench, when we spoke against this this habit of the government of being unable or unwilling to consult, each one of us used a different law or a bill they'd put through. Each one had used a different one to demonstrate how they hadn't consulted. And I used the firearms legislation they're planning to bring in. Now, we haven't seen it yet. We know it's due. I've seen the consultation paper, and there's a lot you can be critical about. But one thing they said is, we have consulted widely. I don't think that's true. Not at all. So if the government believes they've consulted and they haven't consulted, are they actually lying? Or are they just being misled by what their civil servants are telling them? I'd like to be generous and say they've been misled, but I suspect something else.
You're too kind, Dr. Walker, too kind. Ralph, from your perspective as the president of Conservation Australia, what's your experience been like in terms of consultation?
Well, I attended one consultation session down at Rockingham, which was chaired. It had no structure, quite frankly. So it's a bit loose to even say it was chaired. But there was an acting superintendent, Ken Walker, who led the meeting. And there was a sergeant there, and I think from memory her name was Dallas, something or other. And it mainly consists of Ken Walker telling the audience of what he was going to do or talking about himself and his career. And because there was no structure, the questions were raised when an opportunity was given for questions to be raised, and then it just went all over the shop, and it was disastrous, quite frankly. It was a waste of time. It was invitation only, if I remember correctly, and if I also remember correctly, there was a number of armed officers there. I wouldn't say they were threatening, but I don't know why they had to be armed at a consultation meeting. But now I have had some meetings with the police at the police licensing branch, 2 meetings with them, again with Ken Walker. And they were more sessions of Ken telling us what is going to happen. They were... he was aware of our club and actually said, I like the model of your club. I wish there was more clubs operating like you. And I'll talk about the club a bit later for people that may not know. But essentially, we provide a feral pest service, eradication through shooting, through humane shooting methods. And again, at those two police consultation sessions, it was Ken basically just telling us what he planned, and it was some really crazy ideas. I was thinking when we tried to push back on them, we were blown off, I would say. Yeah, they were disappointing. It's like I actually feel when I reflect back on it now, it was like Ken gathering intelligence from us on how we operate, so he could put it into into the act or this consultation paper to make it so damn bloody hard that they're going to force close down shooting. And in fact, he did say that. He said, "My aim is to get as many firearms out of the community as I can, and I'm going to do that by making it so damn hard that people just throw their hands in the air and go, look, it's too hard, it's too costly," and they sell or hand their firearms in. And he said that to that effect, not in those words.
So I'm just a bit lost for words because I feel a little bit sick hearing that we have an elected representative of the people who has been treated like this. We have a president of a legitimate organization doing a service that, frankly, a lot of people take for granted and wouldn't do it themselves because they live in the city and they don't understand how it works. But this is why I'm trying to put these stories out there to show exactly what we do. And we've just heard from you two fine, upstanding gentlemen that this government has been consulting and treating us as sounding boards when they're not listening to what we have to say. And that is something that I've heard repeatedly, not just from politicians that I've spoken to, and not just from shooters, but from other people. And I'm glad, Dr. Walker, you've got up in Parliament and used firearms as an example of where this government isn't being genuine with how they're representing the consultation. And we've just heard how Ralph described how he's found them. It's disingenuous. And that's why I've said, after the shooting groups got together and have said, we'll only meet with you if you meet with us under this umbrella, it's a waste of time. They're not listening. They've already written the act. They don't care. They've got their own ideology that they want to push through. They have total control of both houses. So this is how it's going to be. So what do we do about it? And we'll get to that towards the end of the conversation. But Dr. Walker, I just wanted to go back to you because this week, today's the 22nd of October. For those listening, this will be out tomorrow. But this week in the media on Monday, the Police Minister, Paul Papalier, got up and said the draft laws will be out tomorrow. So we all got ready. I took the day off work and was sitting there. I contacted your office. Like, where is it? Where is it? And then all of a sudden, late in the afternoon, this discussion paper dropped. Were you told that the draft law would be out this week, Dr. Walker, as a sitting MP?
I wasn't told anything about this at all. If you're in the scene, you'll be paying attention, but it didn't come through the Legislative Council at all. I've just actually checked on the parliamentarians' website. The Legislative Council, there's no mention of firearms legislation. Bills in the Legislative Assembly, no mention of that either. So we haven't got, this is not on our agenda just yet. They've been working it, and it's about time they worked on it, of course. But we've been kept in the dark. I've had no briefing yet on this. And so I'm just waiting for the government to decide when they see fit to tell me what they're actually going to be doing. The briefing, the discussion paper we've got is actually very like a briefing, a memorandum that we get when the bills are being introduced into the House. So I assume that's what we're going to be seeing, going through the different parts of legislation. It's very troublesome indeed. But could I take you back to something you said on the introduction there, where the map that came out about who owns what kind of weapons? Did you know that the minister, Papalier, said this is all anonymized, okay? It's just a map, but no one, there's no addresses, there's no names. Wrong. You can, and I've seen this with my own eyes, you can, using the right software, which I can't tell you about, you can download the information, process it. You've now got a handbook of who has got long weapons, who has got handguns, where they live is a shopping list for criminals.
Hmm.
So what we're seeing now is that they've actually opened the floodgates for criminals to target people, especially isolated farmsteads, and take their weapons. So it's ludicrous. And then he lied to Parliament about this. He said, no, he lied to the public. I went to a senior member of the Labour government, and I said, listen, I have the information. I'm happy to have this demonstrated to the minister for him to then to make corrective steps about that.
Or apologize.
Even that was a year and a half ago. Not a word. Not a word.
Kate, I can verify that. I've actually been through with a software engineer of how that process worked and how he could run a program and it would spit out with a high degree of accuracy every address that one of those dots fell over. Now, a high degree in the burbs and almost 100% accurate in the country areas because the properties are so far apart, if you can imagine, and therefore there is no ifs, buts, or maybe. It's that house, even though the dot may not fall exactly over it. But don't forget, we're talking. So that's I can confirm what Brian's just said there. It was disgusting that they put that out. It was to demonise us. But don't forget, there's a terrorist element here. We talk about criminals and the bikies. There's terrorism on our doorstep too. And anyone with ill intent could run that program. I mean, this chap that did it obviously doesn't have ill intent, but he's not the only guy that can do it. And he made that clear to us.
So just for those listening at home, this was the police minister at the time directed the firearms registry, which is part of the police department, to put together a list of all the registered firearms in Western Australia. And in Australia, all firearms had to be registered after 1996. Handguns have always been registered in Australia prior to 1996, but after the incident in Port Arthur, Tasmania, they all had to be registered. This police minister directed the police to give this list to the media. There is only one newspaper in this state owned by Kerry Stokes, who is known to be a friend of the Labor Party. And they printed this on the front page. So that's what we're talking about. That is the political scene in Western Australia. My good friend, Professor Augusto Zimmerman, calls it an oligarchy because it is. That is what we're doing with here. And Ralph, you just mentioned intent. What do you think the intent was by that act by the government, who, by the way, is meant to serve the people and keep us safe? That's how, whenever anyone says to me, what's the role of government? Serve the people and keep us safe. And that second part depends on their ideology on how they want to do that. And that's why you need, in a healthy democracy, different views of opinions so that we don't just have one way to keep us safe. What do you think the intent was of that action? I'll start with you, Ralph. Yes. Yeah. Why do you think they did that?
My opinion is that it was clearly to get some momentum for this campaign to reduce firearms numbers, to say, look, this is really alarming. There's all these firearms in the community. People aren't doing anything wrong with them, but they didn't bring that message into it. It's just that there's all these firearms in the community, which I might add have been used safely by responsible people that have been vetted by the police. They've demonstrated reason and genuine need. And I would imagine that part of the vetting process would go to some of the other intelligence agencies like the federal police, maybe even ASIO and ASIS, to make sure there's no criminal or terrorism, red lights there. But so the intent was to create a public, I don't know, what's the word I want to public...
shock and horror?
Fear-mongering, basically. One of the stories was that look how many firearms are in the suburbs. Well, people, the highest density of people is in the suburbs, and therefore the highest amount of shooters are in the suburbs. But we don't go shooting in the suburbs. We get in our cars and we go out to the farms and et cetera, et cetera. So, the message gets corrupted.
Well, you have to credit them with some good intent, which is to keep us safe, which is fine. But look, who causes the most trouble with firearms is not the licensed firearm holders, it's the criminals who don't abide by the law anyhow. So why are you vilifying people who have met standards, they've passed the exam, they're required to follow the law regarding safety of the weapons, how you store that, how you store your ammunition, where you should. We're all required to follow the legislation, except for the criminals. And then they say, it's to keep you safe from say, killing yourself. If that was the case, we would ban every shop from selling Panadol, because that's what they're commonly used for killing yourself. The whole thing makes absolutely no sense when you look at this. It doesn't. And then for those very, very few people who do, with licensed firearm holders, do cause problems, it's a very small minority. And so if they're going to put all of this effort into addressing that very, very small number of licensed firearms holders against the vast number of criminals who are abusing us with the weapons they have illegally obtained, it just doesn't make sense. The whole thing is cockeyed.
Well, it's almost a failure of their duty to keep us safe. And it's also a failure of duty to serve the public after what you've both described. That's just my take on it.
But bear in mind that for the politicians, I have to tell this openly, truth does not matter, ever. What matters is the perception of truth. And the perception they're giving out is that there's danger here. There's people with firearms that can kill you. We need to get them out of circulation to keep you safe. And the perception comes across, we're doing a good thing for the people. And the people mostly who have got no idea say, oh yeah, they're keeping us safe. So they're manipulating the people with this fear story, and it's absolutely not reflecting truth.
Kate, if I could just add a couple of points to that. It was referred to as the doxing, that photo. You may have heard that term. So that was a public safety issue that they put that photo out.
Absolutely.
It endangered the firearms in the safes. They could have belted the crooks, the baddies, belted down the front door, and there you're sitting at the dinner table with your wife and kids, and there's some crooks with potentially high on drugs. Either they are or they aren't, doesn't matter. But they haven't come into us nicely to get those firearms. That's the point I want to get at, And so they haven't just endangered the firearms owner, it's the family and the kids, and it could be elderly, disabled people living there. That's the point I want to make. It was
And in addition to that, we don't have castle doctrine in this country. So I have a lot of listeners in America, and they would say, well, that's good because you've got a firearm. We're not allowed to. We are told as an Australian, if we're in danger, we are to call the police. Or there is laws in relation to equal force. But, as a young woman, if someone breaks into my house and I'm not legally allowed to use my little pistol to defend myself, I have to use myself. Now, 55 kilos against a 90-year-old off his face criminal who's here to get my gun. That's the reality of Australia. And it's not right. We're going back to this, keeping us safe and serving the people. The laws are not aligning, I don't think. And I'm not a politician. I did run for office once upon a time, but I'm completely out of politics now. I don't want to run again, for those who keep asking me. I've lost faith in the system. The only faith I get is from Dr. Brian Walker in WA, because he's been the only one who's had the balls, quite frankly, to stand up against this government. Our friends in the Liberal and National Party have been oddly quiet about this discussion paper, and someone sent me an email they sent to Libby Metton, who's from the Liberal Party, and she said the Liberal Party won't comment until they see the full laws come out, the draft laws come out. Well, what are you waiting for? And I think we already know the answer. They're both as bad as each other. Feel free, Dr. Walker. That's just my opinion. But I also wanted to ask, how does it make you feel Ralph, I'll start with you. So you represent Conservation Australia. You talk about eradicating feral pests humanely. How does it make you feel as someone who's looks like you've been involved in this for a while? You're a seasoned shooter, probably like my dad. You take pride in what you do. It's a skill that you've learned, and feel free to tell your story about how you got involved with it too. But how does it make you feel seeing just how far we've come in this state to the point that we're staring down the barrel of another gun confiscation, limits on how many firearms we own, and potentially the next generation of Western Australian shooters to begin with not having the same access to firearms, the same ability to learn the skills, or the same opportunities to use it to explore our great state, the biggest state in Australia, to go out shooting and hunting? How does it, just tell us what you're thinking?
Well, I am gutted. I'm gutted. And everyone I speak to who is a firearms enthusiast, whether they be at a club or they're in my club. Like when I say a club, like at a shooting range, a rifle range type of club, one of the disciplines. Everyone is gutted by this, and there's a lot of anxiety going through everyone that's involved with firearms, has an interest in firearms, and they just don't understand. They say that you're targeting the wrong audience because of the statistics. I'll give you real quickly on my background. So I'm 64, coming up soon. Oh, heaven forbid, I don't know where the time's gone. But yeah, look, I got interested in firearms when I was about 14. So that's pretty much a 50-year career of being a firearms enthusiast. I was so interested in firearms that I joined the Army Reserve. I then went into the regular army. I spent 23 years in the SAS. So I had the highest level of firearms training you could possibly get in the SAS, but also through the School of Infantry and through other courses. I just can't think of the proper name, where everyone from all the units go and do certain courses on firearms. But then you have the School of Infantry, where the infanteers go, and then of course I have my own courses specialising in SASR, including counter-terrorism, on the counter-terrorism team. And through all that time, I've had an interest in firearms, from reloading. I've shot just about every discipline. About the only thing I haven't shot is black powder. So that I've got a very good rounded knowledge of firearms. But none of that's taken into account in these rules.
Yeah, I can see your medals behind you, and I was contacted by a lot of veterans who were the main group of people affected by the recent caliber bans, because they love shooting long-range precision rifle. That's what they did when they were serving our country, and they were the ones who had their guns confiscated off them. When a few Americans listened to this podcast, and we spoke about it last week with Aussie Reviews and the other lads on the show, the Americans cannot believe that a government has the gall to disarm veterans when, like you rightly pointed out, Ralph, the statistics don't add up. These are the most law-abiding people in society, and they've just been disarmed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Dr. Walker, I've interviewed you before, and you've served in the military. That's how you got into shooting. Is that right?
Well, not really. No, I was shot at as a boy. I was brought up in Malaysia, Malaya as it was then, in the emergency. So I grew up with Gurkha troops and regular soldiers, weapons above my head, walking in. It was all normal for me. See my father shooting pistols into the jungle, this kind of thing. Seeing me brought back wounded, actually. So I had a very early introduction to weapons. But in the reserve, so actually territorial army in the UK, 7 years. So, I had a very minimal education compared to yourself, Ralph. But if I didn't look after my SLR 7.62 properly, I got shouted at and disciplined very effectively. So you had to look after your weapon. I used general purpose machine gun and submachine gun, and also clay pigeon shooting. I mean, I like shooting. At least I used to when I had the time. And I have been trained in how to look after myself, how to prevent other people from being injured by my stupid actions on the rifle range, and how to actually use a weapon properly. Like, for example, if you're going to actually shoot an animal, you don't want to leave it in distress. You need to shoot properly, accurately. This is what you're mentioning about the feral animals there. I mean, it's all very well saying the foxes are doing damage, and they are, but leaving it to suffer is just not a humane thing to do. So we need to actually use these properly. And so people like Ralph and everyone around about, they need our support, not to be vilified. So that I quite agree that we're doing this just the wrong way. But from a political point of view, I can tell you, in my view, we are becoming step by step a police state. This is my view.
And for those who, a lot of people have already know my background is because I grew up on a farm in regional South Australia, and it was just part of my upbringing. My dad's half Italian, so he loves his Berettas, and he just taught me because he thought he wanted me to know how to handle a firearm, and I became really interested and passionate about it, and now that's why I'm so passionate about this, because it's my culture and it's something that I do with my mates. I love that I have the skill to be able to provide for myself if I need to go out and hunt, and I don't want the government to make it harder for the next generation of Australians to not be able to learn this skill and have this fantastic opportunity in this great community. That's where I've come into it from. Now, Dr. Walker, you've just mentioned police state. Funnily enough, that's what I was talking about just on the phone last night to my sister. I feel like Western Australia is very, very quickly turning into a police state. And I'm sure you can give some examples of laws that the government have brought in. But the discussion paper that was released earlier this week in relation to firearm law reform, one of the topics that has come up online, and I've done an interview about it already, is that they want to put as part of the fit and proper person requirements, because in Australia and in WA, you need to prove that you're a fit and proper person without a criminal record in order to own firearms. They're also playing around with that as well, which we might get to a bit later. But part of the fit and proper person test they will take into account someone's views, opinions, or attitude, and they will also take into account someone's way of living. They will also take into account someone's physical and mental attributes. Now, that's three big things right there that even if you're not into guns, this could be applied to something else that you might want to do. So I'll start with you, Dr. Walker. This hasn't come out until this week. None of this that I'm aware of, unless it's been in any of the consultations, but this has not come out. The gun limits, there's other things that have leaked out. Someone's views, opinions, or attitude will be taken into account when applying for a firearm. My dad has called me and said, get out of the state, because I'm very vocal online. I post all sorts of memes against the government. I would be considered an enemy of the state, and I would not be given a gun based on this fit and proper person requirement. What did you think when you saw this, Dr. Walker?
Well, it doesn't surprise me, and it horrifies me. Look, we just had the voice debate. What we found is that those who were sensibly saying that we ought to vote a no for the voice were immediately vilified as being racist, which is absolutely not correct. You might not agree with their point of view, but to vilify them as being racist is, I think, this is just wrong. So we're having this polarizing. You're either with us, you're against us. If you're against us, you're evil. Now, there's plenty of examples of that. For example, the Public Health Act 2018 would allow a police officer at the command of the police commissioner to stop you, to have you stripped naked and injected against your will with whatever substance they want to inject you. No one's actually said this is a bad idea. I think it's an awful idea. So it takes away your entire rights. I mean, you can imagine this if someone had mental health issues and they're carrying an axe, they wanted to hurt themselves or others, by all means. But if you're simply saying, I don't agree with this, I'm not going to have a vaccine, and you're going to force it upon me by, physical force, this is wrong. Now, the idea of having a view, if you don't agree with my point of view, I'm going to take away your rights. That's just one step on that. This is entirely wrong. We have an ex-police commissioner as the governor of Western Australia. We have got an appointed director of the Triple C, who is named by the ex-premier. The established procedures for electing or choosing that person were ignored. No, he said, we're not going to have your select committee, which is designed to appoint this man. No, I'm disagreeing with that. I'm having this man. Why? Why disrespect the elected people who are doing the job to name someone? And so we're, Even now, with the stop and search, we can have at any of the named 11 areas, you can be stopped and searched without any reason at all. They're saying it's for drugs. Fine, okay? But what right do they have to stop people who are just doing their own business? I'm going to stop you. I'm going to search you. It's like imagine the regime, papieren bitte. Here, I'll take your documents here, and you don't fit. Therefore, we're going to bring you in. It's not that far away from that, is it? It's really quite disturbing. And then this has all happened because we've got a massive majority in the lower house, a massive majority in the upper house. There is no governmental oversight. They can do what they like, when they like, how they like, and our voices are just being ignored. Did you know, for example, I'm a member of the Standing Committee on Legislation. Our job is to review the legislation for where there's questions, there's issues to be dealt with before it comes into Parliament for its proper consideration. We haven't sat once in this term of Parliament, not once have we been asked to review the legislation. This means that the governmental hubris is running roughshod over the people. It's unacceptable.
That's unacceptable, and it's terrifying. And it's also as if this government thinks, because it got such a big majority back in March 2021, which, by the way, was in the peak of the pandemic when the border was closed, that election was about whether or not we keep the border closed. Full stop. They didn't come to the election with this firearm law proposal. They didn't come to the election with the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, which just got thrown out because the farmers nearly burnt down Parliament House. Good on them. I would have joined them, but, I'm already on a list. So I've got to kind of be a little bit careful. This government is ruling as if this is their own fiefdom. And we did have an election back in 2021, so we've got a mandate to do whatever we like because we've got absolute power. They're ignoring voices of Dr. Brian Walker, who was elected and is a representative of the people, and he's taken on the cause of shooting, despite being a representative of the Legalise Cannabis Party. So not all Legalise Cannabis people support shooting. So he's got his own battle behind the scenes that he has to deal with. That's why I'm so grateful for what you're doing, and thank you for coming on. But this is what we're dealing with in Western Australia at the moment. They are not our rulers. They are there to serve the people. But listen to our stories. Look at how the shooting is just one example of this. Ralph,
One example.
What do you think about introducing fit and proper person test that looks at someone's views, opinions, or attitudes?
Well, I was my jaw hit the ground when I read it. I thought I had to pinch myself to say, have these fools actually written this? I mean, this is something the Stasi would write. The West German, I think it was,
East German
police. Thought police. So, I mean, but I believe this has been written by the police. So. And they've just handed it to the government, and Folie has just trotted it out. So what we've got is this shows the police way of thinking, and Paul Papalia agrees with it, and so does Roger Cook. Or they're too silly they didn't read it and go, this is what I'm putting my name to. These words, a person's views, opinions, and attitudes. It's gobsmacked.
One area of major concern I've got is the mental health thing. First of all, most suicides by firearm is actually caused by police. The police are exempt from the mental health checks. Now, I have got, say, patients. I'm a practicing doctor still, despite being a politician. I have got patients there with, say, ADHD, who require medication. It can't be prescribed by a GP, has to go to a psychiatrist. A year and a half waiting list to be assessed by a psychiatrist. We've now got about 80,000 of us are going to have to be referred for a mental health check. When? How many psychiatrists? And this is the same government which is saying we're going to take the young offenders out of the situation. We're going to put them back into the communities where the psychiatrists and psychologists will actually help them to reintegrate into society. And they haven't got enough personnel or enough funding to do that. And now they want to add on top of that the mental health checks for the firearms owners. It's just not possible. So if they've got that box ticked and you can't do it, that's you don't have a firearm because you haven't got the mental health approval. So that's another clever way of saying, right, we're not going to give you firearms. They did the same thing actually with the health service. They didn't say they cut the beds. We're going to cut the full-time equivalent. And we've got so many full-time equivalents for so many beds. But we're fully staffed. The beds are empty. But so we're cutting the service and we're telling people we're fully staffed. And then the staff are working twice as hard to manage the same job. This is just the machinations they're using to actually say one thing and do another and fool the public into thinking we're doing a good job. You're not.
Well, I think there should be mental health tests for police. I mean, they're carrying firearms. We know police suffer from depression. There's coppers on antidepressants. How strong they are, I don't know.
Well, be careful because most of them have got PTSD, but the antidepressants that are prescribed, did you know that half of the people who are involved in violent acts in America are on SSRIs, and it's possible that one of the adverse effects is to make someone more angry.
The mental health thing is I've spoken about this before, about veterans who have PTSD. So they go out to the range because that's their way to relax and talk about what they went through. And now this is being used to disarm them. And also mental health is fluid. One day you might be fine, the next day you might need help. And it's actually disincentivizing people from shooters. It's disincentivizing shooters from getting help because the next minute they come and take away our guns. And I go to the range when I'm having a bad day because it helps me let off steam. And I talk to my mates, and then no one leaves the range with a sad face. You leave the range, you get in the car, and you're feeling way better than you went in. Way better.
Well, imagine what would happen if they said, right, the martial arts, say you're doing karate, can kill people. We need a mental health check for that, and we're going to reduce your ability to approach the dojo because you might be a danger to society. Same principle.
Yeah. The other thing that I can't believe they actually published this either was about someone's physical physical was going to be considered. Now, shooting is the best sport because all abilities, everyone can participate, almost everyone, almost everybody, but they're going to be looking at someone's physical. Now, there's discrimination laws that surely, I know they got around the doxing because WA is the only state that doesn't have any privacy legislation. I don't know if you knew that, Dr. Walker, but
I didn't know.
The federal laws, you got to give the Labor Party credit. That's why there's been no court cases against the doxing, because there's no state-based privacy laws. The national federal laws, which cover us, didn't apply in this case at all. It couldn't. They found a loophole. That's what they do to us. It's sinister. They are attacking the downtrodden, a group of people who they don't like what we do. They don't even want to understand what we do. They don't understand the history and the culture. So we'll just make it as hard as possible for people to get involved. That's what they're doing. That's what I'm hearing from this conversation. And that's why I'm getting so angry, because as a shooter, and I just think of my dad, and he wants me to get out of here because it's atrocious what they're doing to the people. But we can't. We've got to keep talking. We've got to calm down. The physical. What did you think when you saw that, Ralph? That they're going to look at your physical? Are you allowed to have a gun?
Well, I was going to say look okay physically, but some people might disagree.
We all look all right in the dark. Everyone looks okay in the dark.
I had to leave defence because of all my injuries, like 22 or something injuries recognised by defence. So I'm actually on a military pension for injuries, which is military comp, workers' comp for non-military people. But yeah, look, what I mean, there's people with disabilities that are shooting at the games, or they're in the wheelchair, and it goes on. If I could just say a really quick thing, I did this mental health issue when they started talking about it. I go, hey, I know a lot of vets that shoot, and I don't know what medications they're on. We don't know the left and right of arc of this mental health check. Really, I mean, they're talking about doing it through a porthole, something similar to what the pilots do and what the long haul truck drivers do. But we still don't know the left and right of arc of that. If you're on a mild antidepressant, or you're really quite disabled with some sort of mental condition, it's so broad. But anyhow, when I started hearing about it caused me to create a veterans firearms owners group Facebook page in WA, so we could discuss these issues, and I could share my fears, and veterans could talk about these issues, and
Beautiful.
education sort of thing. So, yeah, we have got a WA Veterans Firearms Facebook club, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. That's fantastic. And I've said to the blokes that if you ever want to come, well, I'll come out to the range. I'll have a chat to you. I'll actually listen to you. And funnily enough, Police Minister Paul Paplier is also the Veterans Minister, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Walker, is that? Yeah.
Indeed. Well, he's actually an ex-serving officer, a very brave one too. So he's not a man without courage himself. But I really don't trust what's going on. I suspect we're seeing here a push to get as much legislation through as possible while they still have that overwhelming majority, and truth and rights be damned. Again, coming back to this, a fit and proper person, that's a very, very malleable definition. I am going to decide who is fit and proper, and no one's going to check what my definition is going to be. We're giving power to some pretty unsavory people, I imagine, whose morals may be in question. You are now going to decide whether I am a fit and proper person for whatever. This is absolutely unacceptable. But do you know what? It will pass. The majority is there, and there's nothing that we can do. The opposition and the crossbench, we are powerless because we don't have that balance of power. We cannot hold the government to account. This is why I was at the local elections today, and I was scrutinizing. And what really upsets me is how many people don't really care about politics. Not many. It's someone else's job. I'll go and vote. That 25-30% voted. Of those who voted, quite a number of them filled in donkey votes, a zero for everything, or they just drew a penis on the thing without actually using their voice to express what I want from my representatives to do. All of us, as a call to all of community, we need to actually be individually responsible, because the politicians are the people that we choose. And if we're not going to be responsible, then irresponsible people can come into power. We need to actually take this seriously. And for that, we as politicians need to get up and say, I am worthy of being elected because these are my morals, this is my beliefs. I may disagree with you, but if you're going to have real opinions and be honest about it and trustworthy, then you're in the right place. I don't agree with them. I think we haven't got that just now.
It also might be a reflection on people who just don't trust the process. They don't trust the system that we have, and the system is failing the people. That's how I feel at the moment about the system that we have. It's not representative of the people. They're picking on groups of society to elevate some people based on race, for example, and then picking on another group because they don't understand what we do, or they have an ideological opposition to civilian firearms ownership in this case. And it might be time for you to get up, Dr. Walker, and remind the Labor Party that even Karl Marx believed in civilian firearms ownership because he knew that he wanted everyone to be equal, so we needed to keep the government in check. And his idea was, after everyone is equal, we burn all the guns. That's the point where he loses me.
Well, we've got the Swiss example, where all of the Swiss men and women too serve in their armed services. Then all of them have their personal weapon at home. They've only got a limited amount of ammunition, so when shit hits the fan, and if they were to be invaded, God help them, they will all be out on the streets with their weapons, pick up their ammunition, and they will be defending their country as they have been trained to do. Now, they haven't got a massive problem with people misusing firearms because they've been trained properly and they're responsible, respectable people. We should do the same.
Now, we had a little bit of a chat before about this being a police state, and it is apparent to me, and I think Ralph as well, and you, Dr. Walker, we've seen that it appears to be the police are prosecuting these changes. They are the ones who wrote this discussion paper. They are the ones coming up with all these ideas. We've had Ken Walker come out and say a few things that scare me from what I've heard in terms of his views on firearms. What do we think when it is the police, who are unelected bureaucrats? They are also meant to serve and protect the people. In fact, I think that's what it says on their badge. What do we think about the police having this control and say over legislation? Are we comfortable with the police dictating what we can do in aspects of our lives, not just in terms of firearms, but in terms of how we defend our homes or what we do on a Saturday night. How are we feeling about police writing policy?
Ralph?
Oh, well, it scares the death out of me. I mean, what's next? Phone taps, ankle bracelets and FAL holders, search you whenever you like. I mean, they already have the data. It's linked to your firearms license. So if they do a traffic stop, they know you're a firearms, you've got firearms. It's scary, and that's why we don't have the police in normally writing the law. If the federal police were writing the law, you could imagine what was happening. And when the state police, it just shouldn't be that way. It's
Well,
got
let
out
me
of
tell you
control.
what's happening now. Remember that legislation which came in with alcohol control in, say, the precincts, like Northbridge. And then what they said was, if you are violent there, we are going to ban you from the precinct. A reasonable enough idea in the first place. Except there is regulations which the police have constructed as to how they manage the legislation, and they have specifically refused to share the regulation with the politicians. So we don't actually have any oversight of what the police are doing on the basis of that legislation. That's happening already. So yes, I would share that point of view. I think we're in a very difficult situation. Another thing here, the police do a fantastic job. But do you know, there are some police there who I think we ought to be very careful of them. We have a situation in our society where there's a punitive aspect. I'm going to arrest you. For example, I was picked up for speeding. I was going into hospital. I was as early as wanted to be. This was some early morning. Had a long way to go, 3 hours drive, and I was speeding up the hill. So this copper stops me, and man, he was angry. I was just being quite nice. Was he? Not at all. Yeah, speeding. So he was a nasty piece of work. He was just itching for me to actually be a bit aggressive. Then he could take some action on me. You could sense that. I read body language because I'm a doctor. I have a lot of mental health cases. I could see this man just dying to actually lay into me. Now,
That's
in
scary.
Portugal, in Portugal, we have the situation where all drugs have been decriminalized. The police have changed from being punitive to saying, you've got a problem, mate, how can I help you? We've now become the police force helping those who are having a hard time. Come on in, let's get you sorted. Now, with this legislation we've got just now, especially this idea of stop and search whenever we want, what's going to happen, and we're seeing this now, is that those police with a moral compass, with courage and with sensitivities, they're quitting. They're quitting in large numbers. Who is coming in? It's the psychopaths. It's the aggressives. It's the nasty ones. So we're actually encouraging a society where the police force is going to be nasty, unpleasant, unhelpful, violent at times. There's a case a while back where a couple was stopped for some traffic violation, and they were beaten up. Look, it was on camera as well, but the police denied it all. The stuff we're seeing coming to the Triple C with when the police are being accused, all thrown out. No case to answer. We're having this problem. It's increasing, I think, and no one really is paying attention to it. The very nature of the management of our population with some of the very serious, dangerous issues is being taken over by police who I think more and more becoming a problem. And I'm concerned.
Now, we are approaching the hour, but I just wanted to get your views on a few more things in relation to the firearms laws. Ralph, what did you think when you heard about the gun limits? I'm dying to know what you think about it. And for those who haven't listened before, the Western Australian Police, it would seem, and the Police Minister also want to limit the number of legally owned guns law-abiding people can own. 5 for hunters and 10 if you shoot competition target shooting. What did you think when you heard this, Ralph? And can you make that work for your organisation?
No. What did I think? I thought it was a disaster. I felt again gutted as a firearms enthusiast for many years. But I felt for everyone else that's firearms owners that's doing the right thing. As we've discussed, we're not the problem with crime. And I have over that limit of 10 at the moment. But through my career of going through all these disciplines from pistol shooting to rifle shooting, then I've probably demonstrated that I'm a fit and proper person about 50 times as I bought and sold and upgraded and this and changed from one discipline to the other. So it doesn't make sense to me that they've just plucked this figure. I don't know where they've got this figure from. I actually did write a lengthy document, which I personally handed to the police, a justification on why I needed so many firearms. And I shoot from feral pest birds up to scrub bulls. So there's no one firearm, and you're struggling to get any 5 firearms to do that. And it depends on the terrain, and if you're shooting from a vehicle, you're on foot, or if you're in a quad bike or something. There's different tools for the job, and that's what I want to be able to use. Now, not everyone is going to want to shoot all those, ferals, and they just get what they need. But how did I feel? Very, very disappointed. It's actually only a 5 limit for someone, in my case, who would be on a hunting license. I think the new term they're going to call it. And it's a total of 10. So if you're shooting at the range and you're a hunter, it's a total of 10. If you're just shooting at the range, you can have 10. I don't know how that works, but if you're a hunter, it's only 5. So I'm disappointed. They haven't listened. And I'm not the only one that's put in submissions on this. I know a couple of the biggest gun stores in Perth have, the owners of those stores, and so they have not listened.
Because that will destroy an entire business. I mean, why would you open a shop in WA when you can only sell X amount per year, and the number of licensed law-abiding shooters are reduced because it's too hard. There's too many hoops, and we can't get through all of the hoops.
Well, there's going to be that, and then there'll be an explosion of ferals because they're going to make it so damn hard that you can't get out to the properties. They're trying to corral everyone into gun clubs for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know why they're not corralling people out to shoot feral animals.
What we need is focus on taking weapons off the criminals. That's what we need to focus on. But taking weapons off people who know how to use them sensibly and responsibly is just a waste of time and effort, will bring minimal gains, and we're just giving free rein to the criminals. We seem to give a free license to all the criminals. In the drug scene, off you go. You've got your risks here, the firearms there. You've robbed people. You've got your firearms from legitimate owners, or robbed a gun store. What's being done about that? Nothing.
Well, they're not protecting our property either. That's their job, is to protect our property. And they're saying, there's 6 firearms stolen a week, I think Paul Papalia quoted the other day. Well, why aren't you policing and stopping that? And why are your recovery rates so damn low? It's something like, I don't know, it's like 1 in 10 that they recover. The big gun store, I think, that had about 200 pistols stolen, and that's what they want, is the pistols. Funny enough, they don't want the guns, the crooks. They've only recovered about 4 or 5 of them, is what I've been told, of 200 pistols that were stolen. And that was 2 or 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
So
and
Ralph,
Ralph, I also wanted to ask you, is your organisation going to survive if these new laws come in?
Look, it's going to make it extremely hard with the property letters, the permits. So typically when we go to an area, we might have 4 or 5 lined up, properties lined up that we have permission. Obviously, we've got permission, and they are now talking about getting a permit for each one of those properties. So the cost is going to be, we don't know what the cost is going to be, but that cost is going to flow on to the person that applies for the permit to go for that weekend. And the permit will only be issued for that specific time and to that property.
How many police do they have available to do the paperwork?
I'll take that as a rhetoric question, Dr. Walker. Maybe you can ask, that can be a question without notice in Parliament. Craig can write that up for you.
Well, it will actually be a question in the committee of the whole when we come to that part.
Okay, excellent. So we are approaching the hour. Dr. Walker, I just wanted to give you the floor to use a term you're familiar with, or practicing when I'm a politician one day. Never going to happen. Sorry, I'm an anarchist now, everybody. I've reached that point after this stuff that's come out this week, that my views, opinions, and attitudes can be used to disarm me when I have not hurt a fly. I'm outraged at this government. I think the whole system needs to be torn down and start again. But you represent the Legalise Cannabis Party, yet you are out here standing up for shooters. Now, I know there are some shooters who are a bit like drugs and guns are bad, a bad mix. Now, obviously, yes, we don't shoot under the influence, full stop. Safety first is always at the forefront of a shooter's mind. Always. That's why we are the safest sport and recreation in this country, because we don't fool around with our guns. We take it seriously, even if whatever we do on the weekends or on a wild night, that's up to us. It's our bodies. As someone who represents Legalise Cannabis Party, what do you say to shooters who will be listening about why they should support you?
Well, you should support whoever you think is best needing your support and will represent your views. So I'm not going to say everyone vote for me. What we stand for is actually not just cannabis. It's not a single issue party. Cannabis is an example. We were lied to for 90 years about the dangers of cannabis. It's not. Yes, you can get high with cannabis. Yes, you can do naughty things with cannabis, but it's not dangerous. Alcohol is far more dangerous. We're not banning alcohol. So the question really is, what do we stand for? I stand for wellness, physical, mental, social, and financial wellness. Then comes social justice, because in my medical practice, I'm seeing so many problems coming because what's happening in society is making people sick and no one's fixing it. The homelessness, the domestic violence that's there. Everything is actually cannabis adjacent. For example, the hemp industry, which is there, we could transform the topsoil, we could transform the microclimate, we could actually get there's a $1.25 billion forward estimates profit from legalizing cannabis, but the whole hemp industry is about $20 billion to the West Australian economy. We could do that. So we could transform our society, build any number of hospitals, find people approaching treatment rather than actually being penalized for having chosen cannabis, which is a great medication for stress and for pain as well. There's so many good issues for this, but it's not just about cannabis. It's about freedom, it's about truth, and it's about holding government to account, because you've lied to us in this case and many other cases. Let's start with the truth.
Smashed it, Dr. Walker. Jack's been doing a good job with you. Hello to Jack. I used to work with him and Craig in the Libertarian Party office.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And Ralph, just to finish up the conversation, is there anything at all that you want to say to this government as a seasoned shooter, as an upstanding gentleman, as someone who served our country? What would you say if you just had the chance and they would actually listen? What would your message be?
Leave the shooters alone, the licensed FAL holders that have met your test, your fit and proper person test, and they've demonstrated genuine need. These are the pillars of society, really, because they're too frightened to do anything wrong because they're frightened of losing their firearms. So they're the best law-abiding citizens, in my opinion, in the country. If an FAL holder is the most highest law-abiding citizen in the country. So go after the criminals. Stop the spin on stop the doxing. Stop the spin on your 50 cal demo, which was on a non 50 cal gazetted range, which you should have been charged for. Stop the nonsense on the Bearcat vehicle, because no one is interested in shooting your Bearcat vehicle. And, do policing. Capture the fire. Get the firearms back that are stolen from legitimate FAL holders. That's your job.
Oh man, I couldn't have said it any better. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me tonight on Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty. Dr. Brian Walker, Legalise Cannabis Party, please give him a follow to keep it on top of what he's doing in the Parliament for the shooters of Western Australia. Ralph Folie from Conservation Australia, I'm sure you've got a Facebook group out there or a way that people can get involved, and also that fantastic veterans Facebook group that you talked about before. I'm Lady Liberty. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Lady Liberty Australia. Thank you again for joining me. And as Ralph said, please, Western Australian government, just leave shooters alone. I'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you all.